up. Make sure y'all shout us out. Tell your peoples to get on. We about to have a very important conversation. I got you, bro. Empowering Black men in school psychology, man. We're gonna get it. So, how you feeling, man? I don't know if I can hear you. Let me say something. Talk to me. Talk to me, Kendall. I can't hear you. Can someone in the chat let me know if y'all can hear me? Let me know if y'all can hear Kendall as we get it together.
How
I
about
think
now?
you in now. Man, we loud and clear now, man. What's going
Okay,
on,
cool.
man?
Man, nothing much, man. Trying to enjoy this summer, a little bit of summer that I have. How about yourself?
Man, it's going well. It's going well. So my team, look, the rest of the Black School Psych fam know what's going on. My direct team, some people don't know what's going on. We had some major life moves, man. So my wife told me I can't share that yet. So we got some things we gotta get lined up before we make it public. But I'm closer to you, to say the least.
Okay, that's good to hear, man. I'm excited to hear about that news.
Yeah. I'll hit you up offline. We could talk about
Okay,
that.
for sure, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, it's a major move. It's a major move, man. But look, it's Friday. We have a very important discussion that we're gonna have. Like I said before, for those who have joined tonight, we're gonna talk about. Yeah, Charles, I'll hit you up too. It's gonna be big news. I haven't shared it with everyone yet. It's big news though. Look, my team laughing because I can't hold water. I'm bad at keeping secrets, but yeah. Some big things popping. But tonight, man, we wanted to have a conversation for the brothers in this space, um, the Black men. The ones who aren't discussed often enough. We wanted to create this space to have a conversation, and I this is by no means saying that I am that the center of this work is by no means saying that Kendall is the only one doing this work. I think both of us we stand on the giants of the people who have come before us, and I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out. I see Charles on this call, of course Charles Barrett. We got Dr. Scott Graves, who has paved the way, who have been doing tremendous research in this space. I think he's at Ohio State now. Shout out to the Ohio State. And we got Dr. Brandon Gamble, who has done tons of research in this space. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Black women as well. So, we can't have a conversation about Black men in school psych without discussing the importance of Black women in this space. And I would be I would be doing a disservice to this conversation if we didn't take a second to shout out. I think just this week, the Dr. Celeste Malone is only the second Black female president of the National Association of School Psychologists, and her presidency started, I believe, July 1. I want to say so. Shout out to Dr. Celeste Malone and the brilliant Black women who have paved the way for us as well. But look, man, we're gonna get into it. So most people know me, Byron McClure, school psychologist. I do too much all the time. But Kendall, I want you to talk to the people, man. Introduce yourself. Tell the people a little bit about you, man.
Okay, I'm Kendall Kelly. I'm originally from the DMV area, Maryland, and I spent time growing up in Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area as well. So, kind of been back and forth my whole life. I actually got into the field of school psychology from Dr. Byron McClure. We went to church together, and he kept,
Yeah.
putting a bug in my ear when I was in undergrad. School psychology, school psychology. You should look into it. And I never really paid too much attention to it until I shadowed him at the school that he was at, and man, I was like, this is the work that I want to do. This is a place that I could really, you know, um, make a change in our educational system. So um, that's where I am, and I went to I was in Bowie Stage program for a little bit, and I decided I wanted to go for my PhD. So I transferred to another university. I'm at Texas Women's University now. I'm entering my second year. This upcoming school year, I will actually be the equity coordinator for NAS Graduate Student Committee. So I'm excited about that, and yeah, just looking forward to growing in the field and being a part of the Black change that we see in our field.
Man, that's awesome. Congrats to you on your success, all the big things you got popping in the field. I see Dr. Malone. Celeste, look, you missed it, man. we just shouted you out. Congrats again on your new presidency. You know, this network is going to support you in everything that you do. Kendall just introduced himself. And yeah, man, it was cool. Like you said, we got connected through church. And that's something else that we got to have a discussion about spirituality in this space of school psychology. I know you mentioned that you did some work at Bowie State. I see we got Dr. Wood in the building. What up, Dr. Wood? Who does some work over at Bowie State as well. So man, just these HBCU connections run deep, and like you said, man, a big part of this work, like you came over and did work with me at Anacostia, like in the field, in the space. One of the funniest stories is that big old fight broke out. Oh man, we had some good times, man. But it shows the need that we can do, the presence that we can have in this space, man. I just want to say, like, I'm proud to see the work that you've done and seeing you matriculate in this field, man. It does me, it does my heart warm. I see Nick on this call. I thought I saw Jared join as well, but man, we got so many up and coming young men in this space that's just gonna keep pushing this work forward. And so, man, I'm excited for this conversation and for the future of school psychology, man. I see Crystal. Look, man, there's not enough of us folks from Hampton and how we're deep in the building all the time. But shout out to my fellow Hamptonian, Krista. She says the Black community and faith is cultural. Absolutely. And so we're gonna shift this conversation and get into some of the questions, man. I know several people have submitted questions for us so that we could have a conversation to talk about some of the things that are pertinent to Black males in this space. And so, if you're part of this conversation in this chat, like we don't just want to talk at you, we want to build with you. And so, please, please, please drop questions inside the chat, engage with us. Let's have a real deep conversation. And I'll throw this first question out. Some of these were user submitted. And the first user submitted question that we have, this person says, I'm the first Black male to go to graduate school, let alone get a PhD in my family. That's big, that's major. Can you share some tips, AKA the blueprint, on how you made it or making it through? And Kendall, you're in it, you're in the thick of it. It was at Bowie State, now you're at Texas Women. So, man, I'd love for you to start answering this question first, and then I'll chime in after you.
Man, the first thing is self-care. Figuring out how to move through your studies, but also care for yourself because you can't pour from an empty well. So you have to prioritize things like eating healthy, working out, finding a healthy release. For me, that's a therapist. Just figuring out ways to be healthy because, this process will drain you and these systems were not made for us and they don't accept us a lot of times. So I say that's the first thing is to prioritize your well-being. And I think things are on the up and up from there. That's how I would begin the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to begin that conversation. Self-care is crucial. I'm glad that, self-care therapy is part of the discussion, is becoming part of the discussion in our space amongst Black men, amongst Black people, period. For me with this, man, it's tough. If there was a blueprint, I think that we would have more people in this space, to be honest. I'll answer this in the reverse. I think that there are powers and systems at play that need to be de-emphasized, that need to be dismantled and restructured. And entities such as the National Association of School Psychologists, they got work to do. Like one thing, like we can't continue to carry the burden of people who have systemically failed us. And like what I mean by that, I think so much about the work of like Dr. Malone, of Dr. Barrett, of Dr. Graves, of Dr. Proctor, who have poured so much into this work. I mean, folks are tired. And I think that's because like people have put so much on us to elevate us, to amplify the work that we're doing. And like, we got to have all the answers to figure this out. And like, the reality is we shouldn't have to have all the answers to figure it out. We should be able to pick up our books, go to school, matriculate through the program. The reality is that isn't the case. The reality is there isn't a blueprint for this. The reality is most of us, we're the first ones, either in our family, getting undergrad degrees, getting doctorates, and we figuring it out. And that's one of the reasons why the Black School Psych Network is in existence, like to help establish what a blueprint might look like so that we could build a community so that we can lean on one another and support one another. Like, man, just put in the chat, as a Black person going through the field of school psychology, how many of you have thought about like leaving the field? Like, man, and this ain't it. Like, this not for me. I know I have. I know that the lack of representation has been big for me. And it's like, yo, how can I make it through this? And for me personally, like, man, I felt alone, like, through my programs. I felt like, yo, I had to be the voice. Yo, put yes in the chat if you felt, and if other people made you feel that you have to be the voice for all Black people. Like, man, it's so much that we have to carry in this space, and there isn't a blueprint for this. But some of the things that I have found that have worked is like, man, just being persistent no matter what, no matter the barriers that come up. Like, yo, I am going to setting intentions, and my intention was I am going to be a psychologist no matter what. I am going to make a difference in the spaces that I maneuver no matter what. And all the other BS and stuff that comes along with it, yo, we jumping over hurdles, we blocking that stuff out. Like, man, we sidestepping all the stuff because it's not going to sidetrack us. And like, man, it's hard. It's easier said than done. But you know, man, that's something that really helped me. I talk a lot about this strength-based approach and knowing your strengths. One of my top 5 strengths is achiever. And so it's just innately in me to want to win and be successful. And so one of the things that I want to convey with these conversations and with the Black School Psych Network is, yo, like, we don't have to be in this alone anymore. Like, we don't have to be the lone person feeling that they have to advocate on behalf of all Black people anymore. Like, yo, we got a whole network of dope people that's going to support one another, that's going to elevate one another, that's going to lift one another up. Yo, I pledge, coming through my fraternity, shout out A5A, we had this poem called He Ain't Heavy, He My Brother. And man, in this space right now, school psychologists, it's an exciting time because we ain't heavy. Like, we each other's brothers and sisters in this space. Man, listen, I feel like I'm preaching to y'all on a Friday night. Kendall, what you got, man?
Man, I want to add on to that. So on top of that, I feel like that is a means of self-care. It's being disruptive to the system that you're in, because you won't make it in a healthy space while being passive. So you have to attack the racist systematic practices that we go through. You know, that involves, you know, filing complaints against discrimination and racism. That involves speaking out against injustice, and you know, that's what you were brought to the program for, whether they intended it or not. They brought you there, and your spirit and your space, you're supposed to fill that void that they have. So as a means of self-care, be yourself and figure out, how can I leave my mark? What can I do to stand out to make a difference for people who look like me?
Absolutely. And I see we having some good conversations going in the chat. I'm scrolling up a little bit. I see Dr. Malone said that she ended up creating the diversity course for her grad program. And that was Temple. Let me know if I'm correct with that. I believe it was Temple. She says we didn't have one when I started there. And like, man, like, how heavy is that burden that we must carry? Like, yo, we created whole courses out here. Like, that's what we're doing. Like, yo, we should be able to just go through these courses. But you know, and Dr. Wood says she almost left her program back in the 90s. So what we're talking about is it's not new. But we cannot allow this to continue on because the recruitment, we got work to do. The retention, we got work to do. And the Black School Psych Network, we're going to do that. I see Nick. Shout out to Nick. Nick says, our graduate school psych programs built of equity. I mean, the simple answer is no. I mean, just straight up. Most of these institutions weren't designed to serve us. I mean, that's just a fact. That's just the reality of it. I mean, when you look at, and I could talk to y'all, right? Because we understand like Greek life, and we got to understand the Divine Nine was created like out of the need for social capital, for social resources, for us to feel safe in these institutions that literally were not designed for us. And as we matriculate through these programs now, like, yo, those same things still exist. Like, these institutions, like, yo, think about it. They create diversity initiatives out of consequence. Like, yo, something happens and they have to, like, you got to go to this diversity training. Like, that's how these institutions are operating. Like, we do it because we have to. Like if there weren't federal mandates and things, like I'm sure some of these people wouldn't. But I don't want to go all conspiracy theory here. The bottom line is, man, like yes, these institutions aren't designed for us. That's why we have HBCUs in the first place. And if we want to get deep, if we want to get to the association level, why y'all think we created the Black School Psych Network? Not every institution is designed for us. I got you, bro. This conversation is about empowering Black men in school psych. Let's keep going. Let's keep going, man. The next question that we have, this is another heavy question. Is there room for racial or social justice in school psychology? And again, shout out to we got some dope staff, faculty, researchers, folks on this call. Some folks who have been leading the way in this racial social justice work. If you all heard me speak in Boston at NAS, I mean, that's one of the things, like social justice, like it's emerging in this space. But when you look at, there was a 2020 demographic study that was done, even though this is a emerging focus in the field of school psychology is late to the party. While it's emerging, most school psychologists, practitioners aren't actively engaging in it. And so is there room for it? Absolutely. Like there's a need for it to address these issues, to address issues of disproportionality, to address issues of all these things that we know day in and day out in the data. However, as practitioners, there's not a lot of work in this space. There's, as far as the research, there's not a lot of people who are actively engaging in this work in this space. So, Kendall, I'll let you chime in here. What are your thoughts about this question? Is there room for racial social justice in school psychology?
Yeah, I would say absolutely there is, and if there isn't, make room. I think that's part of our job is
That's a
to
bar,
find
yo.
and find where the gaps are and figure out how to close those gaps. I mean, that's what we're here for, and that's a part of the craft is seeing what the need is and how to address the need. So I would definitely encourage you, if you have a vision to make something happen, go out and do that.
Man, that's it. Kendall, man, this next question that we have, I know I brought you on as a guest in one of the early episodes of the Healing Sense of Conversations podcast, and we talked about the need for Black men in school psychology. And the next question that we have asks, why aren't there more Black men in the field of school psychology? And I just know, like, I'm gonna go off on this one, but you're much more thoughtful and concise. So, and you've done research on this, so I'll pass it to you to answer this question.
Man, how much time do we have? It's such a loaded question. So when you look at the field of school psychology, obviously it's historically white, and school psychologists were termed the gateway to special education. So off from the start, you already have a disconnect within the Black community because we know that special education was used as a means to resegregate Black people. And so there's already a disconnect between uh, mental wellness in the Black community because of distrust of the medical system and just systems in general, government and all those things. And so historically, there has been a lack of effort to recruit Black students. And there's been a lack of support to our Black schools who have had school psychology programs. And even in fact, HBCUs are reluctant to build school psychology programs or keep them because they're reluctant to send their Black students into a white field who is not kind to Black people. So there are many layers to this when you talk about why Black students are not entering the field. A lot systematic racism, excuse me, is held in our higher higher institutions of education in general. So when you look at a field like school psychology that's historically white, the field isn't made for us. So that's why retention is low. That's why our programs are made for us because they don't anticipate us coming into the program, let alone keeping us when we get here. So those are just a couple of things that you have to address. Historically, this field was not made for us, and they don't want us here. And so you're literally breaking down walls to even make it into the field, let alone be successful. So that's how I would begin the conversation.
Yeah, man, and you bring up so many valid points. And reading through the work that you did. I encourage everyone, please, please, please go read that the article that Kendall wrote on. I know Dr. Scott Graves has wrote on this extensively. Dr. Proctor has wrote on and researched the recruitment and retention of Black people in school psychology extensively. And man, one of the things that really stands out to me about the lack of Black men in this space is, man, just think about Black students. Like, yo, I want everybody to put yourselves, I mean, we don't have to imagine that if you're Black, right? Like, you're a Black student. And if you were in the minority, like, how many of you actually saw a Black male school psychologist before? Like, yo, I didn't even know that school psychology was a thing, let alone like see a Black school psychologist in the field. Like, I just didn't know that was a real thing. And so if your only encounter with the field of school psychology, oftentimes for Black people, is through a lens of harm, it's through a lens of exclusion, is through a lens of being at an IEP table and a white female school psychologist tells you, like, yo, like, you don't belong in this space, for lack of better words, or excluding you, or telling you what you can't do, or placing you in special education, even worse, removing you from the general education setting, placing you in a more a secluded environment. Why would you want to become a school psychologist? It just doesn't make any sense, yo. So, like, so much harm has been done to Black male and Black female students. Why would anyone rationally want to become part of this system that has caused harm to people? It just doesn't make sense. Dr. Malone talks about this all the time. Yo, the field of school psychology has so much harm that they have to address and repair for Black people to even feel a sense of belonging in this space. And yo, I got you, bro. Empowering Black man school psych. If we're gonna talk about it, listen, let's talk about it. It's nobody else that's directly adding to Black men, Black female students being disproportionately placed in special education more than white able-bodied women. If we're gonna talk about it, man, let me chill out, y'all. I feel like I'm about to make some people mad. But that's the reality, right? If we just look at statistically speaking, the most people in the field of school psychologists the field of school psychology is made up of white women. Like, these are facts. This isn't my opinion, these are facts. Who are testing kids? If it's majority, predominantly white, female, able-bodied people, and they're testing people who don't look like them, yo, they're making these decisions. And is it through a lens that's culturally responsive? And if we look at this report from NASH, shout out to Dr. Farmer, who did so much work in this space, these same people using these tools aren't doing it through a lens that's culturally responsive. They're not even engaging in practices that they would consider to be socially just. And again, if that's the lens, if that's what's happening in the space, why would Black people want to go into this role that is leading to higher incidents of disproportionality? It just makes absolutely no sense, man. Kendall, what's your thoughts about that?
I feel like everything you said was right on point. Just pushing back on you saying that you're gonna chill. I think, if we're gonna say it, let's say it all. Let's say it all. Let's talk
Go
about
on,
it.
man. Go on.
Man, many different levels. When you talk about the supervisory role, and how even in that role, from if you're talking about our graduate teacher training programs to the supervisors and becoming internship to the supervisors who supervise early career school psychologists. It's just disproportionality all around. At every step, you reach a hurdle because it's just resistance to people like us who look like the people that need help, right? So shout out to you and Kelsey in the book that you're writing. Um, that that deficit thinking funnels down to what we look like. So even when we get in positions to where we sit at the table as equals, they don't look at us like equals because the deficit mentality that's taught in our schools, the deficit mentality that's taught in our programs in our field. it's consistent throughout. And so I think that's something that we have to fight against, and something that we have to attack directly.
Man, that's a fact, straight up. I'm happy that you mentioned the book that we got coming up, man. We address a lot of these issues. Shout out to Kelsey Reed. Yo, she's legit one of the smartest people I've met. To where I can like spaz and go off on these things. She's like, yes, and this is like how we should go about doing it. She's just super thoughtful in her approach and her writing. Shout out to Kelsey, who is the yang to my yang. Like we balance each other, and she's just doing sensational work in this space. So shout out to her. Dr. Ness Davis says, I throw the reverse card down at meetings with great pushback. And you made a comment earlier to Dr. Ness Davis of this is some of the reason why you enter into this field as well. Dr. Wood says, not surprised, as most of our undergrad psych programs, we are still a secret. Yeah, and we see most people going into clinical, going into counseling, going into educational psych as well. So yes, very, very important conversation happening in the chat. Man, Kendall, and one of the conversations that we had, I believe it was on our podcast episode, man, you talked about some of the stats of Black men actually in this space. But man, I would love for you to talk a little bit about some of the stats. One stat in particular being how it's more likely to go into the league than it is to, as a Black male, than it is to go into the field of school psych. So talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so very little statistic out there, but based on some of them that I did run across, Black men are less than 1% of the field, and Black school psychologists are about maybe 4%, around 4% of the field. And in our community, a lot of us, have dreams of going pro in sports, and we always talk about how hard it is. What is it? It's about 1% of athletes make it to that point. And so, just kind of playing around one day, I was looking at the stats, and I put on my little calculator and and I'm just doing that and comparing research articles. And I said, wow, like it's more likely for me to make the NFL than it is for me to become a school psychologist, because there are more Black NFL players than there are Black school psychologists. And just looking at the proportionality in the field is very small. So those are the few stats. And I will also say that this is a point to make, that we need to do more research on Black school psychologists to close those gaps that we have in research, because there's not a lot out there.
Man, and that just, it blew my mind, man. And why this work is so important, why we got to stand on the shoulders of giants who have come before us to make sure that we keep this work going. Man, I feel like this conversation, the book that I got with Kelsey is, we talk a lot about this strength-based approach, hacking deficit thinking. And like, man, I feel like we kind of been going off. And so I kind of want to shift towards, man, I was on a conversation with my team yesterday. Man, we got some big things popping. Listen, if you're not part of the Black School Psych Network, if you're not following us, go follow us right now, ASAP, as soon as this call is over. Yo, we got some big things popping. Tierra, I promise I'm not going to tell what's about to happen. But, man, we got some big things popping. And one of the conversations that we had, man, it's joy over everything. Like, it's okay if we bring joy into the spaces that we enter and strive for. Like, we can address all the issues, we can talk about all the things, but it's also okay for us to prioritize joy as well. And so when I heard that joy over everything, like that really resonated with me. And so, man, I would love for us to talk a little bit about the potential, man. Like, Kendall, describe what you see if we can actualize all of these ideals, all these things that we're discussing. And what might happen if it was more of us, a Black men in the field of school psychology?
I would see us being more preventative than reactive. A lot of times we're very passive, and we wait for referrals to come in, and that's the first time we see students. And we go through this cycle of, the testing cycle, to where that's not really helping students reach their full potential. We all know that a lot of our special education programs are very minimal. They don't progress students. And so it's pretty much a death sentence educationally in a lot of places. So I see us being more change agents in the school and redefining what it means to be a school psychologist. being more than just the gatekeeper to special education, but actually being a literal educator in the school, changing pedagogy, changing ancient racist systemic practices that happen in the schools, reversing the culture not only in our field of school psychology, but also in school, and actually educate our students and increasing scholarship, helping them get scholarships into colleges, helping them, go to vocational school if that's for them, actually preparing them for the future. I see school psychology being a multifaceted field as opposed to let's just work on assessment, progress in the field. That's what I see that's doing.
Man, I love it. And I see Krista just put in the chat, strength-based research. Man, just to imagine if it was more of us, if we were able, to have these conversations and not just shift just towards the center and finding balance, but shifting towards flourishing, which we talk about in the book with Kelsey and I. If we were able to shift towards thriving for Black people in these spaces, man, it's a powerful thing. And it's a reality that I see and a reality that we will actualize in my lifetime. Like, man, I'm speaking that into existence. And I know the work that you're doing, the work that the giants before us have done, the work that the Black School Psych Network will continue doing will help us to actualize all of these ideals, man. And it's a joyous thing that I'm excited and looking forward to. If there's any questions, please drop those in the chat. There is one more user submitted question. And Kendall, I'd love for you to start this one out. Can you share some words of advice for early career Black male school psychs? I might better be able to start that one. Yeah, I'll start that one. The number one piece of advice for early career practitioners that I want to share is get out of your office. It will do you no good if you're a school psychologist, period, but especially for Black male school psychologists. Like, yo, we don't need another Black male school psychologist who's just going to be part of this test and place culture. Like, we just don't need that, right? Like, we need school psychologists in general. We need Black male school psychologists who are going to be in these school psychologist streets, like out in classrooms, in the hallways, making your face known. And you might be like, Dr. McClure, like Byron, like, yo, that's real small. Like, it's not. Like, there are so many school psychologists who just stay in their office and that's it. Like, we don't need that. And so for Black male school psychologists, like, yo, one of the tricks that I could give you, yo, get a clipboard, put a computer sheet of paper on there, and just walk out of your office and go in the hallways. Like, talk to everyone. Like, go into classrooms. Like, go to your school leadership and say, hey, these are my strengths. This is what I can do. I want to do therapy. I want to do social skill groups. I want to help with homecoming. I want to help with, our culture and climate. Like, make your skills known. And then once you actually get an opportunity to do something, like, yo, be amazing at it. Like, don't just be lackluster, man. Like, don't just, do a bare minimum. Like, yo, like, man, show off. Like, and listen, this is a authentic conversation. And there's a space and time for, like, being humble. Like, yo, as a Black male school psychologist, like, yo, you gotta show out and show your skills. Like, show that you're able to make a difference. And just for the very fact of you being a male in education where it's heavily female dominated, like, they're gonna put you to work. Like, I know one of the first things, like, people didn't care that I was a school psychologist. People was like, yo, it's a male here. Listen, we need you. And they asked me to do, like, so many different things, and I did it just to be part of the school community. And that's how I got my name out there, and people started to trust me and come to me for my advice and for my opinions and sharing strategies and tips. But it all started with me getting my face out there, going into classrooms, letting people know what I'm skilled at, what I'm able to do. And then when I actually got a task, like, doing a good job at it as well. The other thing that is so important, y'all, and I didn't learn this until honestly, it was too late. But asking for help, man, this conversation is for the brothers. Like, man, it's I'll speak for myself, Kendall. I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to ask for help for anybody. Like, nah, I got it. I do it on my own. And I thought that asking for help was a sign of weakness. I thought it was a sign of like you don't know what you're doing. But asking for help like allows you to one build relationships and connections, but it allows you not to take on the weight of the world. And to actually get wisdom from people who are probably been there and done that. So ask for help. You know that it's okay. And then I guess the third thing I'll say is, like, yo, you gotta be able to say no, right? And that might sound contradictory from the first thing I said, um, but because like once you get your name out there and your face out there, you're doing all these things, and people are coming to you. People will keep coming to you. People joke and say that the reward for being good at your job is more tasks and responsibilities, but you gotta know how to set boundaries and tell people no, because that's a quick formula for burning yourself out. So those are the gems that I have. I see the chat is blowing up. Um, so Kendall, as I look through the chat, anything else you want to add to that, man, just from your perspective?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool. I see Chris is saying, Chris saw I work sneakers too, and I wasn't lame. Yeah. Man, that's something that's important too, right? Like being able to understand the needs of kids, like, and even one of the realest things that I ever heard is like be yourself. And I was talking to like someone who was just starting out, like they was trying too hard, and I was like, yo, just ease up. Like Kendall, think about it. Like coming to a place like where I work, like people can know if you're real, if you're authentic or not. Like if you like anime, like yo, you like anime. You don't gotta pretend to like stuff that you don't like. Like be yourself in these spaces, and kids will respect that as well. I see Nick has a question. Nick says, "How do you go about dealing working with admin and faculty who isn't about equity and diversity in schools?" Man, that's a tough one, Nick. Um, the reality is, especially in this political context, there are admin and faculty who aren't focused, who aren't prioritizing equity and diversity. And I think as school psychologists, especially for Black practitioners, one of the things that we can do is we are experts in data, and numbers don't lie, y'all. And so one of our roles is helping people to understand data and then making effective decisions using that data. And so dealing and working with admin, these are the numbers. We are suspending Black students 3 times more in comparison to white students. It's not my opinion. This is a fact. And here are solutions and some things that we can do about it. Present facts. And once you present those facts, have a solution and do something about it. So thanks for that question, Nick.
I
Khalida
want to add
said,
on to
being a
that.
host. Yeah, go ahead, Kendall.
Let me add. Great point. Point out the facts, and a point that we often overlook is that NASP has tons of resources, and in our programs, we love to say, "Oh, we're looking to be NASP approved and APA approved, but we don't have the time to deal with these equity things." But it's like, are you overlooking the tools on NAS site? Like let's go to let's go to NAS and let's look at what's on there. Let's start there. And then another thing is to find somebody in the school who focuses on equity. It may not be in your program, but chances are there's somebody in the school who's doing some type of equity work. Find them and see how they can support you in whatever work that you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you made me think, um, like sometimes, man, it's gonna be you by yourself. Like it might be one other person, and find that person. I mean, they gonna ride with you. Like I remember, there was an event I was planning at the school, and it was a student led event, and I was helping them. It was a rally. Like we had lost one of our young people to gun violence, and I was helping our young people to organize this rally, and it turned into this really big thing. Kendall, were you there for that or no?
Yeah, I
I
was
don't know
there.
if
I
you
was
was.
there. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was there.
the reclaiming our peace event.
Yeah.
And like man, yo, like literally, no lie, y'all. Like our students came up with the list of demands. You could Google this. This is all true stuff. It was this big thing. They were making demands to the mayor, the chancellor, our school was going through a redesign. And so the mayor and the chancellor, like, were putting dollars into our school. For those who know, like, DC is a very political, like, place. And so, like, we're making demands to the mayor and chancellor, and it's like, yo, they're giving us money. And it's like, you going about it in a very, like, Malcolm way of doing it. And, like, this is rubbing some people the wrong way. And, like, I got called into the principal's office. This is true stuff. And I had one person who was there with me. Like, man, we was ready no matter what. And I looked at him. He was a social worker. I was like, yo, you ready? Like, man, we about to stand on all the things we've been talking. And either way, they're going to have to carry us up out of here. And it was a cool thing, man. They were supportive. They were just like, yo, like, what's up? Like, there's a certain way you got to go about it, which I understand. But the point is, man, this equity stuff is hard. This diversity stuff is hard. But we must be threats to injustice no matter what. And you have to know, like, what you stand on and how far are you willing to go. You know, is it just research and words and just talk, or are you really about the action? And for me, like, yo, this is real life, and always got to be about the action, man. So, you know, find whatever that issue is that causes for you, and stand on it. But also, there's a part of use leveraging social capital, and Dr. Brandon Gamble talks about this social capital concept, which is in essence relationships, and this idea that, you know, you can leverage relationships and partnerships as well. And that's important for us in this space as well, to be able to understand how to go about getting things that you need, understanding that there's going to be times where you have to compromise certain things, never compromise your integrity, but how can you negotiate in good faith to get the things done that you need to, for your students as well, which is always important too. Um, so I'm just checking out the chat. Yeah, someone in the school has a champion, and you know, I think that's something that we can all do. Yeah, just some real good conversation going on in the chat. Carlita says we have an equity team at her high school. The students are a part of the team fostering change as well. You know, one of the coolest things that I was able to do, with the redesign work that we did, is I had a student team, and it was students from 9 through 12, all walks of life, and I brought them into the conversation as well. And so I had them reviewing our discipline practices and policies. I had them reviewing student code of conduct, cell phone policies, and they were part of the conversation. And then we co-created with teachers and leadership, and so we were able to come up with solutions as well. And so back to Nick's point, like, it doesn't always have to be you, like, complaining about things. No, like, let's co-create, co-design solutions together and build with people as well. So, Kendall, anything that you want to add to that?
I think that was good.
All right, cool. And then we got one question. Dr. Ness Davis says, how can we recruit and support Black males into school psych? New York is in great need of Black male school psych. And again, I encourage people, man, like, we got to start with those pioneers and researchers who have been doing this work. Please read the works of Dr. Proctor. She has talked about recruitment and retention for decades at this point. Dr. Scott Graves, I mean, he's done a piece on Dr. Beckham, like, man, just highlighting the needs, like, from a historical perspective. And I think understanding the historical perspective, like, understanding that, this isn't new. Like, this is something that has been pervasive, from the inception of school psychology. Once we have that historical understanding, like, we can make sense of this current context right now. Read their research. Read, the work of Kendall, like, who is continuing this research, and discussing, like, what needs to be done. Understanding things that have been tried and that have been ineffective. Like, those things are important. I also think that we have to call out entities such as the National Association of School Psychologists, for being, like, conspirators and, like, standing by idly and not doing enough. I might get in trouble for that, but so what? I said what I said. I mean, that's a fact, right? Like, yo, think about this. APA, the American Psychological Association, put out a statement for their role in racism. But yo, what kind of stuff is that? That's wild, right? So like this stuff is deep. It's embedded in the very fabric of all of these institutions, all of these graduate training programs, and our work as well. Like, this stuff is deep. But like there's this glimmer of hope because we're having this conversation and people are tuned into this conversation on a Friday night and we're talking about it. We got the Black School Psych Network. Sierra, Carlita, Aileen, Krista, I almost gave it away, man. But yo, we got some big, big things in the work that I think is just gonna propel the recruitment, the retention, and the elevation of Black school psychologists and ultimately Black students in this space, man. So Kendall, you want to add anything to that?
Scholarships, funding for Black students specifically. That's a really big thing. That is a barrier to the field. All this free work that we do, doing tests, going to schools with practicum, and it being unfunded. A lot of our programs don't have funding. So scholarships, I would say, is probably one of the bigger things that could be implemented to recruit and retain Black students. Having equitable programs that focus on equity and inclusion, programs that are actually inclusive and shaped for Black students to come in and do work as opposed to creating the work. A lot of these spaces that we go into, they're looking at us to do all the work instead of having something already in place for us to excel and carry on the work. They're looking for us to create it. So those are a couple of things that I would say that would help increase our retention.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think like we can't stress enough funding and the financial support, which is so important. Like I heard a conversation. No, I forget where I heard it. It could have been Celeste. So I forget who it was. If you all knew who it was, please drop it in the chat. But they talked about part of the recruitment and retention issue that we have. Just think about like your practicum, right? I remember my practicum in Texas. Like I had to drive an hour just to get to my practicum site. But think about the privilege there, right? To where I have a vehicle, I gotta pay for gas, and back then, like gas was cheap. Like think about how high gas is now, and having to fund like all of those things, having to pay for an apartment, like all of those things out of pocket. And I didn't have a substantial graduate assistantship or a scholarship at that time. Like yo, that's a lot. Um, like man, and how can we sustain that? Like we just can't. To where like man, I was blown away where some of my classmates were like, yeah, my mom was a school psychologist. I'm like, no, I just heard about this 2 weeks ago. Like that's not an exaggeration. Like I didn't find out about the field of school psychology until I was in graduate school. I started out as a clinical psychologist and switched after my first semester. But people have generations of education in this space. Their mother was a school psychologist. They had parents who were board members and part of this. So like this stuff goes deep. And so it's like, yo, this person is gonna get me connected with this practicum, with this internship. Like they're good. Yo, just think about that. I came all the way from the DC, Maryland area, all the way down to Texas with a suitcase. And I had to figure it out. Like, yo, that's hard. That's hard, hard stuff, man. And so funding is super important. It's critical, man. Having a network, and like I can't stress the importance of this Black School Site network. Like having people who I can hit up and like, yo, have you experienced this? Like, how did you make it through this? Like, yo, do you have connections with internships or resources, or how can I get funding? Or just being able to call someone and be like, yo, you know what this person said to me today? Like, how important is that? Right? So we got a lot of work to do, but I'm just excited that we're having these conversations in this space. Kendall, anything else, man? Anything else as I'm checking out the chat?
Nothing I can think of. You hit it on the head.
All right, and I see Celeste says, folks may be mad Byron, but you are not saying anything that I haven't said publicly and in the national leadership space. Facts are facts.